my name is Marilyn Hallett, and I run You've Earned It, the digital media platform for South African 60-plussers. And we'd like to welcome you to the 5th episode now in the Retiree Reflections video series. And before we start, I'd like to also give a big thanks to the sponsors, Just SA. Thank you, Just. And today we are really privileged and very honored to have not one, but two professors in the house. This is a retired power couple who are both renowned, distinguished, and esteemed academics in their areas of interest. And before, another thing I'd like to say at the start is, in the interests of transparency, that in my previous life, the life before You've Earned It, which was pre-2011, I had the privilege of working with Professor Evance Kalula on many occasions when I worked with the recruitment office at the University of Cape Town, and always thoroughly enjoyed those occasions. And Professor Evance Kalula is an emeritus professor of law at the University of Cape Town. He is also an honorary professor at the University of Rwanda, a fellow of the Stellenbosch Institute of Advanced Studies, and an ad hoc executive policy advisor to the University of Lusaka. He is currently, even though he's retired, he is the chairperson of the International Labour Organization Committee. And Professor Kalula has a string of other titles, which I'm not even going to attempt to mention, but his academic policy and research interests are in international and comparative labour law, international trade, regional integration, and social protection. And Professor Sebastiana Kalula, who is Evance's wife, prior to her retirement was a consultant in geriatric medicine at Groote Schuur Hospital and the University of Cape Town. And after 22 years of service, Sebastiana retired as an emeritus associate professor and senior scholar. And she also continues as the director for the Institute of Aging in Africa and as the director of the International Longevity Center, also in South Africa. So Evance and Sebastiana, after that long introduction, a very, very big welcome to you both. And thank you so much for joining me today. And I know it's going to be an absolute pleasure talking to both of you. And if you are both in agreement, I would very much like to hone in on the non-academic sides of your lives. Is that okay?
That's fine, Marin, and thank you very much. It's a
Great.
pleasure to talk to you again.
Thank you so much.
Our previous experience was a mutual pleasure. We really enjoyed working with you.
Super. Oh, thanks, Evance. Thank you for those kind words. So to get started on this interview, my understanding is that your roots are in Zambia. Can you tell us a little more about yourselves, your family? Who are the Kalulas?
That's a difficult question. It's simply to say we are wanderers. I think that's the best to put it. We've been away from Zambia, I think, Sebastiana much longer than I've been, because I think she left quite a while ago to go and specialize in the UK. So we have been, as it were, been privileged to wander to the UK, Lesotho, and now here. But at heart, we are Zambian in outlook and in every respect. We, of course, count our blessings to having ended up in Cape Town.
Lovely. And then to move on a little bit, Evance, you had heart failure in December 2012, which resulted in your being the recipient of a donor heart. Would you care to share the details of this tumultuous event in your life, and how did you recover from that, and how has this event shaped your life?
I suppose I can say something, but in terms of the actual scientific aspects of that, Sebastiana also happens to be my personal physician. But essentially, as you said, it was heart failure, which I had for quite a while. And then it eventually resulted into a complete heart failure. I was lucky on December the the 12th to have a heart transplant. And just to say that I was blessed with a woman's heart, so I crossed the gender barrier, and I'm always grateful for that. But I was lucky. I was in the right place, right support from the family, particularly Sebastiana, and of course the doctors, the surgeons who attended to me. Out of the 5, one was with the great man, Chris Barnard, at the first transplant as an assistant. 3 were Chris Barnard's students. So I was in good hands in Cape Town and in the Chris Barnard Memorial Hospital. So I was very, very lucky.
Wow, that's a big wow, all of that. And Sebastiana, you're Evance's physician, but also his wife. How did you manage with that catastrophe in your life?
It was quite difficult, and thank you for inviting us to this discussion. It was difficult for me, and he refers to me as his personal physician by default because I'm in the house, and then he takes the easy path, you see, to ask how about this and how about that. It was difficult for me because the condition gradually deteriorated, and with all the knowledge on the prognosis, I was aware of all that. And so for me to accept it, it was very difficult. And to live with him, I had to keep strong and not even discuss, what might happen in 2 years or 3 years. And eventually, when the doctors who were managing him at the Christian Barnard Hospital said, we have reached a stage where the only option is the transplant, we had to sit down and discuss that. And I recall when he was in hospital, with the transplant, or when he was in hospital frequently going into ICU for management, I couldn't sort of bear the stress anymore. I sat on the stairs, broke down, and I always recall my daughter saying, "Mommy, don't cry. I don't want to see you crying." So it was difficult because I was fully aware. It wasn't, of what the path of this was going to be. And, just imagining what is going to happen, what are we going to do? That's what I lived with for a number of years, because I knew what the eventual outcome would be.
Gosh, a very tough time indeed. And here you are today, 22 years later. So that's amazing.
Yeah, 12 years this year, end of this year.
Yeah. 12 years, sorry.
Advance means when the 22 years is the time I have been at Krutis care, but the transplant was in 2012.
2012, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And so this heart has done you well, Evance. Here you are, and looking very well, I might say.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now to move on a little bit. So Evance, you've worn many hats in your career, one of which was being a warden at one of UCT student residences for many years. And I read in one of the articles that I had a look at that one of your fellow wardens said he was the warden who always knew who was struggling. And tell us about that. I'm fascinated by the answer to that.
Yes, it was difficult for me because I went to boarding school. I left home when I was barely 7. and never really lived at home since then. I was brought up in Zambia in Dutch Reformed missionary schools. So I tended to know what my boys were going through, and also had the advantage of knowing what they were up to, basically. So I, I tended to think I knew they are away from home. I imagined that is what it meant to be away from home. But what I think, recalling from my experience, they would need in terms of a guardian. So I was approachable, open to them, listened to them, and generally built a support system among themselves. So that for me was not as difficult because I was just living my experience, so to speak.
Very interesting. And now to fast, I suppose in a way you were actually like the father away from home,
Yeah.
and being so approachable, which is really great. Yeah. But now to fast forward a little bit to your retirement farewell at UCT, there were two comments made by Emeritus Professor Dani Visser and Deputy Chair of Council Debbie Budlander that I had a little chuckle over them. And the comments they were about you, Evance, that you are truly an international person and that you're always at your happiest when you're jetting off somewhere. And the other comment was, Evance is the kind of person who pops up in all kinds of places. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, I think both were right in a sense. Danny, of course, who has been a long time friend and colleague, as well as Debbie, whom I served with when she was vice chair of council, knew of my disposition. I've always liked to travel. And uh, now more than ever before, in terms of seeing the world, but much more I tend to think of myself now as seeking redemption. That is contributing to whatever I can. It's a labor of love. And with Debbie, when we served on council, I found a kindred spirit. There's nothing very involved in terms of very committed to social justice and so on. So that for me came naturally.
Interesting. But you've climbed the ladder in academia from as a student to professor and then as deputy dean. You've been a lawyer, you've been an advocate, a human rights fellow. You've served on local and international committees, and you've served on boards, advisory panels, government agencies and trade unions, as a consultant, an expert, and a resource person. And you've done this all over the world. And you've also both lived in countries around the world. So I can't imagine that you retired from all this. So what are the areas that you're continuing with, and where is home?
Home is in Cape Town. My chief surgeon said because of my condition, when you have a heart transplant, your immune is deliberately lowered. I can't live in a tropical country now for long because if I got any tropical condition, that would be fatal. So he said to me, you are condemned to spend the rest of your life, your days in Cape Town, and then quickly added, but there are worse places to be condemned to. In terms of what I'm involved in, basically three things. I spend quite a lot of time in Geneva for this position. It is position, it's not an employment. And that really sort of takes up most of my time. Secondly, and this is my greatest love, is uh, to supervise and mentor young academics coming along. I do that. I am still continuing to do that. And I also try to look out to develop some young talents across Africa to write in law. And that's those I think are the three key activities that preoccupy me. They are labors of love. But as I keep saying, they also give me the illusion that I'm giving back something for having been so lucky. I've been fortunate. And of course, if I might add, that travel and all these activities have been at the expense of Sebastiana, who, as you can imagine, is not only my personal doctor, but mother, wife, and she's the one really who have held back because of these activities. She's a much better doctor than I am a lawyer. In fact, I'm not a lawyer at all in a true sense of the word. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. And Sebastiana, my plan was to speak to you and Evance about the non-academic aspects of your lives. But I was thinking, and from my side, and running a platform that's geared at 60 pluses, it would be negligent on my side not to take this wonderful opportunity, having you in the room, and to ask you at least one pertinent question that pertains to this demographic. So just for our listeners' benefit and to put your career in context, you are completely, as far as I understand, invested in the areas of geriatric medicine, aging and longevity. You are, as I mentioned previously, the director of both the Institute of Aging in Africa and the International Longevity Center also in Africa. And you're also a member of several African and South African research networks, societies and associations, all geared at global aging, geriatrics and gerontology. So in my eyes, and in essence, and maybe even in Evance's eyes, you are the queen of longevity, aging, and geriatric medicine in this country. And I see that your research interests are falls in older persons, physical and cognitive functioning, and the epidemiology and management of dementia, plus the quality of care in medical wards for older patients. Gosh, I think we need to invite you onto the You've Earned It board. But anyway, very briefly, what advice would you give to today's vibrant, active 60-pluser in order for them to age gracefully? Advice in terms of mental and physical fitness and nutrition. What would you want to say to this audience?
Thank you. That's a brilliant question. And it's nice that I'm talking about aging and I'm in the age group myself. So yeah, so I think the basics is other than maybe me looking at over the 60s, it's the trajectory, starting from earlier on, the life that we live. We need to keep, active. I think we all know about that. Even with some disabilities that might set in, within that disability, we shouldn't give up. Because once the body, you stop utilizing the body, as we age, the repair mechanism has to be sort of supported. So by keeping active, it's supporting the repair mechanism and keeping muscle, all the organs in the body active, because when we are up and about, it's not only the legs that are doing the work, the heart, the lungs, the eyes are stimulated by looking around, and they stimulate the brain and so on. And then also to keep active in things that stimulate the brain, there is no age limit at learning a new thing. So learning any new thing that is picked up keeps the brain active, and the nerves actively connecting with each other. And with all those, then we delay the onset of frailty, either mental or physical. And of course, obviously, it's also looking at what are we eating, because our body, the brain, they need to be nourished with good food. So again, looking at nutrition is very important. And lastly, it's maintaining connections with people. And also, it's what I keep saying is saying it's not retire the word, it's retire, RETYRE. So you put on new tires and, go out there. It's a nice time in that you choose the things that you love to do and keep active at that. And I wish the general environment created an environment where other people are encouraged to engage in activities. If such an environment is created for them, it would keep people healthy for longer and not need support from either government or family or friends. So I think it's just aiming at keeping active and independent and to keep going as far as we can do. Thank you.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. Absolutely. There's an old adage that says an academic never retires. And I read recently that an 80-year-old academic said that he believed it was his moral responsibility not to retire because he was still incredibly effective at the age of 80 as both a teacher and a scholar. So Evance and Sebastiana, I know that you are very busy in your lives at the moment in your retirement, but do you think that retirement in the traditional sense will ever fit into your agenda?
I'm tempted to say no, but obviously my sense is that that in my case, I'm speaking about my particular case, will be determined by my health. And my sense is that as long as I'm healthy, as long as I can add value, as long as I like what I'm doing, I'll continue to do that. And it's a pity in South Africa that compared to the US, for instance, academics in the US more or less go on forever. It's there is no retirement age. Yeah, I mean they can go into their 70s. In fact, now they have tried to rein them in because they could see these wandering old professors not knowing where, demented in a sense. Now they are pulling them in. So an academic really, it allows you to continue, as you said, to guide, mentor, and encourage younger scholars. So I think, and also gives you, as Sebastiana said, but gives you more flexibility. I don't think you have got the entire flexibility, but gives you more flexibility. So that I agree with the statement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. We need to change tack a little bit now. The sponsors of this video series are Just SA, who are retirement income specialists. So if I might ask you a couple of questions on retirement savings. And I'm very aware that UCT has quite a robust retirement savings program. How much did that help you plan financially for retirement, or did you still have to do quite a lot of your own homework in terms of saving for this time of your lives?
Allow me to speak first, for the simple reason. You speak of the UCT retirement as being robust. Relatively, yes. But that's not the end of the story. I always say of myself that I'm a miner's son. Sebastiana is a small commercial farmer's daughter, and the attitude towards money between us is very different. And thank heavens, she's a farmer's daughter. It cannot be overemphasized to think of saving and saving beyond what is pensionable, because the gap, as we discovered, between what you earn, and I put in almost 30 years at UCT, and what the retirement income is, as you know, UCT gives you a lump sum, and you have to manage from that lump sum. And in order to manage it, if you are going to hopefully live a full life, you've got to cut down drastically. So my advice, and I'm sure Sebastiana will probably weigh in because she's much more much more prudent about these things, is that you have got to save. You've got to begin looking at the possible investments, be it property, and listen to the advisors who hold out that, because what you are getting now is not what you are going to get. And besides that, Madeline, life becomes more expensive as you get older. Medication, to mention just, even with a very generous kind of medical aid that UCT has, you still fall short of your medication. So it's important to save. It's important to invest as much as you can.
I think you've actually answered my next 3 questions, because I was going to actually ask you along those lines, the kind of advice that you would give young people who may not necessarily have the word retirement in their vocabulary, but hopefully they recognize that saving is a necessity. But I think you've definitely answered all of that. And I agree with you 100%. I think it is very difficult to retire in the same kind of life that you might have been used to prior to retiring. And I think that's what a lot of people are battling with these days. But what excites you both about the future? And another question thrown in there, if you were to look back on your lives, is there anything that you would do differently?
I would have been a better father, a better family person than I've been. But Sebastiana has had it all at a cost, I think. Let me leave it to her to sum up. But in terms of work, I've been lucky. In terms of health, I've been lucky. I count my blessings. I'm doing what I love now. It's something. Sometimes I, particularly if you refer to my international work, I wish I'd done that work all my life. But of course, I would not have been ready.
Isn't that wonderful, though, to be able to look back and think now that you're actually following your passion, you enjoying what you do? That is wonderful. And Sebastiana, anything that you might have done differently?
I suppose for me, the difficulty is I came from my family where my mother was, a housewife 24/7. And I, immediate generation sort of went to a very busy life where, the being a doctor on call, sometimes I would be working all weekends. So in a way, I felt guilty maybe about, am I giving my children what they deserve, or even, am I being the wife that the wife should be? I suppose I was comparing this to my own mother, to the extent that at one point I asked my children, saying, did my work affect you in any way of what you are now? And they burst out laughing at me. And then they said, we are lucky to have you as a mother. So maybe they, became independent in looking after themselves, doing, packing their own things at an earlier age, but that hasn't affected them in any way. And they said they were grateful. So that was my only, where I was asking questions, did I do the right thing? And the work that I've been doing, especially geriatric medicine, I've been lucky. And it's a gratifying work. That's what I found. I don't think I would do anything differently. But I said retirement gives you flexibility. So in the flexibility, I'm still continuing to be a parent be a wife. So I'm filling in the gaps.
Oh, that's lovely.
Thank you.
I'm sure your
Yeah.
children are absolutely that they love having had you as parents and have probably had a wonderful life, and they're very grateful for that. And it's amazing how I think most of our children turn out very well. And it's I think we go into parenthood maybe not having all the tools that we think we should have, or probably down the, you know, maybe reflecting on that, we think we didn't have those kind of tools, but they've all turned out absolutely fine. And I'm sure your boys are exactly, or your children are exactly the same. But it's time to wrap up, and I really want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure. I wish we had more time to chat, and an absolute honor and privilege to chat to the two of you and to have you participate in this retiree reflection video series. And I really wish you both well and all the best, and thank you very, very much for being with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Sebastiana, and thank you, Evance. Really appreciate it.
The pleasure has been ours. Thank you.
Thank you.